Lights, camera, action. We are now live. Coming to you in stereo. 4K video. Dolby surround sound.
All right.
So I suppose we'll give people some time to stream in. I'm rather new to this Bright Talk platform, so I don't see a list of people joining, but I can assume that that's what's taking place.
Yeah.
We'll start at like 12:02 just to give people a little bit more time to get situated. We definitely have a lot of content to cover here. Around 30 more seconds. Just a reminder, we want to keep this live and interactive. So if you have any questions along the way, please feel free to drop them in the chat for us and we'll try to pick them up live, or at least Melissa will be so kind as to do so.
Yep, I'll jump in if I see any questions pop up.
I'm volunteering you, Melissa.
Totally fine. That's what I'm here for.
And with that being said, we are here at 12:02. We'll get started. This is recorded, so if you miss any of the beginning of it, you can go ahead and watch that on demand. I'll turn it over to Melissa to kick us off here.
Yeah, thanks everybody for joining our webinar, The Cure for Digital Workspace Reliability in Healthcare. Want to introduce to you our presenters today. So we have Michael DiCicco, IS Manager at University Health, and Brian Martinovich, our Senior Director of Sales Engineering here at Login VSI. And I am the Senior Channel and Field Marketing Manager here at Login VSI.
Right. For some reason, we forgot to include you
That's okay.
in our little jiggling pictures.
Awesome.
If you notice, they jiggle a little bit. But in any event, thanks for that, Melissa. So I guess we'll jump right into things. A little bit about University Hospital, University Health. It's a 100-year-old organization. Just a little old, right? From what I understand, one of the first public hospital systems in San Antonio, specifically. So kudos to you for that. And I thought it were worth pointing out, based on your website, you guys are really interested in innovation and advancing the practice of medicine, which I thought, was apropos considering what our topic of conversation will be today. So with that being said, anything else that you'd like to tell us about University Health, Michael?
Yeah, we're a large hospital system in San Antonio. We are directly connected to the University of Texas Health Science Center, which is kind of a medical school, and so we're also a teaching hospital. We are also directly connected through walkway to the VA hospital and a large medical center in Northwest San Antonio. We also have a number of satellite locations within our county and then surrounding counties in South Texas. So we're roughly about 15,000 users, and
That's a lot.
about 50 locations. Of course, we have 2 large campuses, and we're in the process of now building a new women and children's hospital on our main campus as well. So expanding even within our footprint. So
Excellent. That's awesome. Mm-hmm. So 15,000, not a small environment by any stretch of the imaginations. And kudos to you guys for being attached to the USVA. We definitely support our veterans here at Login VSI, both in spirit, but also in providing software to ensure that they're receiving the best medical care. With that being said, oftentimes people are forgetful of this, but we serve an end user, a consumer, if you will. So it's important to understand, like, what is the day in the life of an employee, a typical employee of University Health?
Yeah, so we have, different types of users, as you can imagine, a large clinical workforce. We also have your typical administration and business type users. So the day in the life of a user can be quite vast and varied. We have a lot of clinical staff that move from room to room, floor to floor, and even locations to different sites within town. So they're highly mobile, and where they sit down and work, they expect to have a good working environment.
Oh, that brings up an excellent point, where they sit down. Do you guys have remote workers as well?
We do. We have a pretty good remote workforce, but it's not large. It's we have a lot of remote people that do billing and coding for medical records. We have some remote services as well, and a lot of on-call clinical staff. When they're on call, they're pretty demanding at being able to remote in and being able to get to radiology reviews and things like that, instead of having to drive all the way into the hospital. So
yeah, more or less, we've annexed everyone's personal house onto our own privately managed networks, which is fantastic. All in the name of getting work done, right?
Correct.
So I guess it makes sense to talk about a little bit of the history between the companies as well. How did you end up coming across Login?
So yeah, we came across Login VSI at Citrix Synergy, and in the in the vendor area, and we were kind of just like any other conference goer, looking for new technologies to help our Citrix platform performance and management tools. And when we found Login VSI, it was definitely one of those systems that we knew we were interested and had to learn more about. So
fantastic. And so that brings us to the actual meat and potatoes, the substance of our conversation, and to me personally, the part that I find most intriguing. How did you leverage the Login VSI software inside of University Health? Like that I think is the real thing that people are interested right now, and not for the sake of discussing Login VSI software specifically, because while that is important, the most important aspect of this is more so the methodology and approach that University Health took. So we'll
yeah,
talk about that.
If you guys could please just excuse me for 1 second, please.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, folks. I have some office work going on, and I was just asking them to please keep it down a little bit.
No problem at all. We certainly understand that that can happen, especially with remote work too.
Right. So, our use case for Login VSI is we wanted to find a way as we look to migrate our virtual environment to a new platform to guarantee that we're going to have a high performing system. And in doing so, using Login VSI, we felt that we could go ahead and leverage the system to properly size our environment, so that when our clinical staff are moving around and accessing the systems, that we're giving them a high performing system.
Absolutely. And so you can't know where you're going until you know where you're coming from, right?
That's right. Yeah. We basically we have an existing Cisco UCS blade infrastructure that is kind of on the end of its life as far as its generation and it's time to be upgraded. But in doing our stress testing using login VSI, we were able to determine that the system that we had in place really could not handle our upcoming VDI rollout.
Gotcha. And obviously that precipitated into some testing of the systems that were that needed to take place to understand where we're coming from, right? And so, I figured that some visualizations might be useful in discussing this. But basically, you were able to determine that these UCS blades that you are currently utilizing, you were able to determine what the density numbers on those systems were, correct?
Correct. Yes. So basically, what we thought we had in place for our rollout for density was just vastly off from what we really needed. Using this software, we found out that we could really only run on our older systems about 10 to 15 users per blade server without overwhelming the disk IO. And that was kind of shocking to us because we've always kind of gone down the path of the servers are really fast, the storage is really fast. So as long as we've got enough storage presented and we can put this number of machines on it, that ought to be, get us in the ballpark. And it was eye-opening to find out what we had.
So, I mean, we jumped a little bit ahead and we spoiled the secret a little bit, but let's talk about how we got there, right? The results that you're seeing on the left-hand side of your screen right now. Why would you test your workload without any of your security posturing in place?
Well, so to establish a baseline, we wanted to see what the impact of our security tools are on our environment. And now that in our times with ransomware and different types of security threats and vulnerabilities that are constantly coming out, we have added more and more security tools and agents to our endpoints. And knowing that we were going to have to run those in the VDI environment, we wanted to stress test the operating system without those tools loaded, and then again with those tools loaded to find the cost of security on our platform.
So that's a great point. So why was there suspicion that the security posturing, the tools, the agents, the configuration was part and parcel to the issues that, or the limitations rather, that I would say, as far as your ability to support a certain user number?
Well, we have seen a kind of a slowdown in our systems over the past couple years, little by little. And there was always a thought that it was the addition of these security agents. One thing is, as an end user just using a workstation, you can tell when it's snappy and fast and when it's kind of slowing down. And we definitely wanted to just kind of show our management that the base operating system is not really, the design and the delivery is not really the hindrance in the performance. It's all this extra stuff that we're throwing on there, and we need to account for that when we design and scale for our users when we put this system in place.
So was the expectation, and I'll give the viewers a little bit of detail here at this stage as far as technical. On the right-hand side of the graphs, you can see session count. And you can see the session count growing up to 25. So we're saying these UCS 047 Gen 3s, each blade would support around 25 users. Is that correct?
Yep, we were hoping to get about 25 users, or hopefully more than that. We actually started off our testing with 60 users, and it completely crumbled and failed and just completely became unusable. So we had to scale back down to 40, and we got a terrible EUX score at 40, and we had to scale back again. So when we came down into the 25 user mark, we basically determined that we were at least in the ballpark. And now
so users could utilize their systems at this density number, basically.
Yeah, they were usable, but as you can see, our baseline testing versus our testing with the security tools, we took a pretty good performance hit by running the security tools on the VDI machines, and of course that's required. So
Right, exactly. You can't you can't get rid of all of your security software in order to solve your density numbers. It's not a solution that's viable.
yeah.
Now, that being said, it seems like, if your expectation was to support 65 and that was the way that it was architecturally designed, you're missing the gap. But at least you had an awareness now, and you could plan for that. So just for the audience's understanding here, the chart on the left-hand side, those blue and orange lines that you're seeing is an aggregate user experience metric within the Login Enterprise platform. And what does that mean? That means the point of the user utilizing these systems, what they experience on a generic basis, how responsive applications are, how responsive it is logging in, how responsive it is moving data from one location to the next, kind of aggregate performance data. So as that number gets lower along the y-axis and drops out, the overall user experience consequently also begins to degrade as well. So what you can see between these two graphs here is the impact of the overall security stack on the end user experience. So on the left-hand side, they were able to maintain almost consistently a 6.5 to 6 end user experience score. And in Login BSI world, 5.5 is acceptable user experience. So that's how we understand we can support 25. Now, when you dump the security agents back into the equation, you'll see that right off the jump that the end user experience score is around 5, at times going even below 4. So these users are more or less miserable, but now we have a visibility into the impact of the security software. But you guys didn't stop there.
That's right. So what we decided to do is we sent some data off to Login VSI, and we had some reports sent back to us on these exact load tests that we ran, so that we could say, well, what inside of that EUX score is contributing to these performance numbers. And we learned a lot from this. We learned basically how to read the charts very well. And at a glance, we can see what a good test and what a bad test looks like. So on the left, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, can you explain what we're looking at right now?
Sure. So on the left side, on our baseline test, what we see are some really tight data points. Those blue dots and orange dots, those are samples that are taken throughout the time of the test. And the tighter that they are gives a more reliable experience from the user perspective. If they're spread spectrum, that's a very unreliable or randomized user experience. It might be quick, it might be really slow on the response time. And you can see that by adding the security tool, running the exact same test, the vast difference that we're getting here in our application performance. So the far right column of the chart, you see the response time, and that response time is in the seconds, a lot longer than a second. It's
Right.
it's way up there. So the impact of the security tool definitely what we take out of this is it's definitely having some impact.
So in layman's terms, sometimes the system is fast and sometimes the system is slower. And so because of that, there's a variable experience inside the application specifically. And that's a consequence of the supporting infrastructure's ability to respond to that demand that's being placed on it. So then the next natural question would be like, why is that taking place? And so what did you guys find out?
We found out that it really came down to disk I/O. And great segue to these next slides. When we look at the baseline test, you can see again great tight samplings, very reliable performance, and the disk I/O is very very good. And you can see the green and the red lines up there where the EUX scores are. Our disk I/O is really good as it relates to end user experience. When we look at the right chart with the security tools, well, we're seeing all of those random samples and slow response times, and this is directly related to disk I/O performance. So in the original chart in the beginning, it's an overall end user experience score, but it's not really breaking it down into exactly what was causing it. So having this chart was just eye-opening to us. So we really knew what we were dealing with at this point in time was disk I/O performance. And also, CPU factors into that disk I/O performance as well.
Absolutely. And I because we only have 30 minutes, I'm not going to go through every single chart that that you guys produced and reviewed. Yeah. But more or less, like if you go back in this recording and you look at the general application performance, it almost looks like the disk I/O performance. And so, if you're in the weeds of the technology, you understand it's because of the way that security software works. It's scanning transactions before they take place on those disks. And because of that latency that's introduced, that's why you're seeing the issues that you're seeing. But basically the gist of it is that you now understand you can support this number of users and you can support the security stack running against that many users, basically. And so now we have this incredible set of data that we can go out and look at new generations of technology.
Right. So we had purchased some replacement blade servers that are generation 5, and we ran the exact same load test against that server. So the server number in this case is 45 instead of 47. And we went to a generation 5 Cisco UCS blade. And now what you can see is that we have our baseline has increased dramatically from roughly a 6 to about 7.5. So the value of new hardware is there, and then we knew that we could get a greater density on the generation 5 blade servers than we could on our older ones.
Right. And so, inevitably the thing that the business cares about is what is the cost of this, right? We purchased all this 3rd generation hardware. We know that we need new hardware because warranties expire, depreciation schedules hit, the weight of the additional technology as it influences the end result, it just matriculates over any period of time. One of the leads is buried a little bit here too. If you look at the x-axis on both of these charts, or the y-axis on both of these charts on the right-hand side, you're also looking at 25 users versus 30. So not only is the responsiveness overall better, but also you can support an additional 5 users. So again, when you talk about the cost of one configuration versus the cost of another, it gives you an apples to apples comparison. But that being said, too, we are curious. We got a poll out to the audience right now. We are curious. How does your organization, the organization that you work for, validate changes inside of your end user experience and in your end user compute workspace? This is an example of a change, ladies and gentlemen. We're going from one version of hardware to another version of hardware. But this could just as easily be one version of the operating system to another, or one version of that security software to another version of that security software. So we are super curious. How are you validating those changes that you're making inside of your environment? And with that being said, we'll let that poll run and we'll move on here. So basically, in both of these scenarios, we're looking at the basic workload without the security stack.
That's right. Yeah.
And so, the next logical conclusion is, what does the security stack do to your ability to support that 30 users on your new hardware?
Right. So what we determined was that we could get close to that 25 user mark. Now this particular test on the left is our workload without the security tools, and the one on the right is with. And what we saw here is that compared to the previous generation of server, the security tool didn't have that huge of an impact because I think the CPU is faster. It could handle that the security tools interaction with the disk I/O might have been assisted by the newer generation of server. But in the end, we still kind of were hoping to get a much higher density than this.
Right.
Yeah.
So that kind of leads into one of the last questions that I had, and I just thought that it was worth noting that this is the application performance general averages that we had seen in the previous charts. And you'll notice, even with the security tools all enabled, the performance was acceptable. So now they know they can not only support more users, but they can also reliably execute that with their security stack. And I'm sure that makes people a lot more comfortable. So tell us what your conclusion that the organization eventually drew out of all of this.
Well, we concluded that, to roll out 4,000 user VDI platform, that it was going to take hundreds, upwards of 200 blade servers in this
That's a lot.
scenario. And that we needed much higher density. And if we would have gone live without testing it in this fashion, we would have just had egg on our face. We would have had, the help desk would have been swarmed with calls. We would have had those random sampling points that we saw on the terrible slides. That would have been our normal end user experience. It would have just been really, really poor. So we decided to go back to the drawing board and look at hyper-converged infrastructure.
Yes, hyper-converged. So this actually precipitated in the investigation of an alternative technology provider. We won't go into who that was, and we actually only have about 45 seconds. I knew that this was gonna take place, but that being said, the people that are at home watching this, or the people that will watch this into the future, obviously, please reach out to us, and we could talk about even more than this. We didn't even get to comparing different physical hardware configurations to each other. But with that being said, I did just want to point out that if you enjoyed this conversation, you enjoyed the way the technology is actually leveraged in real life versus speculation or marketing material, please join us for Login VSI Vision, previously known as the VDI Performance Summit, recently renamed to Vision to cover a broader audience. and talk about concepts like this. So I'll close with one last slide, which is thank you. Thank you for joining us today. We really appreciated your time and attentiveness. We'll see you all next time. Thanks again to Michael and Melissa.
Thank you. Thanks everybody for attending.
Thank you.
Bye for now.